Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I want to talk about Brainrot gameplay because I think the number one thing that turns me off about most recent Call of Duty games, and especially Black Ops 6, is the Brainrot style of gameplay. Call of Duty has been making their combat cycle shorter and shorter, their maps get smaller and smaller, and the movement gets faster and faster every single year. So for several years in a row, the overall combat loop has gotten teeny tiny, where all that we have left are a bunch of tiny maps where people can transverse them in seconds, and a spawn system that seems to have genuinely given up caring where you spawn, or might even be encouraging spawn killing. It's kind of gotten that bad. Black Ops 6 is the first Call of Duty game where I sometimes spawn in holding down the trigger, hoping that I can shoot some of the people that are trying to spawn kill me, because I cannot react in the 10th of a second that it takes for them to hose me in my spawn. And I don't think that this outcome, this goal, this place that Black Ops 6 is in right now is accidental. And I don't even think that it was a budgeting issue or an incompetence issue. I'm pretty sure that the Brainrot style of gameplay was actually the design goal, because Call of Duty needs gameplay that is as addictive as the TikTok algorithm, because that's what the target audience is. This is an older channel, so I know a lot of us here are probably 30 plus now, and we are not the core demographic of COD players anymore. As with all things in the world, younger generations come up to replace us as we phase out to doing our jobs, raising families, or just move on to other games. And it's only natural that the product changes to fit the demands of its new core demographic. I think that's a normal, natural, and good thing, and I don't want this to be an old man yells at clouds type of video, but speaking broadly, all people are using social media and short-form content more than they were 10 years ago. Some people considerably more. You've heard me talk on this channel endlessly about algorithm addiction and blah, blah, blah. Well, recommendation algorithms are very popular. They're very fun, and they're addictive to some people, but addictive for a reason. That reason is that they operate primarily by hijacking your dopamine system and pumping your brain with dopamine in just the right cycles to kind of get you addicted and start digging for more content. Video games actually work in a pretty similar way, and pretty much always have, especially if you're playing respawn-based FPS games. In one of these games, you should be respawning about every 10 to 15 seconds in a relatively safe location, and then you have a short period of time to pick a path, pick a strategy, and go to your next gunfight. If you go to your next gunfight and you win, well, you get a moment to recombobulate in a couple of seconds to the next one, and the cycles continue. Or if you die, the cycle goes all the way back to the beginning and repeat. So it's spawn, die, repeat. Spawn, kill, kill, die, spawn, repeat. And it's really not very different than scrolling on Instagram Reels or whatever social media platform it is that you like. Because when you're playing Call of Duty in games, there are very high highs and very low lows in that little dopamine cycle. It's very exciting, you know. It feels very good when you go on a streak and get kills. It also feels very good when you break out of a streak of deaths. The pacing of the kills and deaths is what's called the combat loop. And it's you spawn, you do your combat, you die, and then it resets. And the pacing of that loop is part of the secret sauce of Call of Duty, or any game that has respawns, really. Any game where you have more than one life, or almost any game, period, has some pacing, some loop to it, some cycle that the players get into. And unfortunately, I suspect that the influence of social media addiction is affecting the pacing of some of my favorite video games like Call of Duty. Call of Duty, as a game, it is a game, it's a video game, which is a media product, and social media is also a media product. They both compete for your time and attention in the same way that this YouTube video does, in the same way that the movie you saw in the theater does, in the same way that a comic book does. What they really want is your time and attention. I can't stress that enough. But video games are a little bit different than movies or books that you can pause and put down, and you can second screen a movie. I do that all the time. It's not such a big deal. But when you're gaming, it ends up being a direct competition, because you can't do TikTok or gaming very well if you're doing them both at the same time. I know some people that do. Some people will, not a lot of people. And scientifically speaking, if your attention is breaking back and forth, you're going to do worse at your game. And you're also not going to get the same engagement, that sort of fun dopamine cycle from any sort of social media algorithm. So Call of Duty, unlike these other media products, has to compete very directly to pull people away from social media. And I suspect that somebody, somewhere in the deep, dark underbelly of corporate Activision realized that a demographic shift in attention spans was in progress. Or, to be less derisive, we could describe it as a shift in a preference for the speed and pacing of their entertainment. And then the developers sat down and started working on an even faster paced version of Call of Duty. This process may have been conscious, a deliberate research effort from marketing teams to figure out what's going on, or it may have just been a little bit of trial and error that happened to move with the market. Kind of like how I talk about conditioning people, like the audience, on social media algorithms, but on the back end, whether the algorithm rewards me for my content or not conditions me. So Call of Duty can be conditioned the same way, so I don't know if it was a conscious effort or not, but the end result is that Call of Duty now has combat loops that are extremely similar to the average scroll times of short-form content. And I think that this is bad for Call of Duty because Call of Duty just fundamentally wasn't built for this. In order to achieve those faster combat loops, the maps got smaller pretty much across the board. There are some bigger maps, but if you look at the trend over the last 4 years, the overall map size has gotten smaller and smaller. Sight lines on these maps have gotten considerably wider, especially sight lines on spawn. Spawn killing has become a lot easier. The objectives, whether you're capturing B flag or whatever the domination hill, or the hardpoint hill is or whatever, have largely become more porous and more open. There's no real way to lock them down. There's so many paths in and out everywhere. Player movement speed has increased considerably so that they can transverse the map faster, not just because their legs are moving faster, but they've got all these new climbing, sliding, mantling, auto movement ability things, zip lines, whatever. And even the spawn system seems to have given up caring about doing its job, and it'll just spawn you anywhere that's available, even into grenades, into bullets, into missiles going off with people looking right at you. And the end result is that with every single one of these corners that was cut, the maps, the movement, the spawn system, all of that, what its end goal was shaving a few seconds off of the combat loop to get it tighter, 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 tighter. And now we have maps, modes, and games designed for players to spawn and live less than 10 seconds. Honestly, 10 seconds is being generous. I don't know if you've seen a lot of the gameplay. I've been getting smoked in these videos. But the point is that they want the gameplay loop of Call of Duty to be about the same size, or about the same length as the average attention span for scrolling on Instagram Reels, which is somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds. If this was a conscious design goal, I believe that it was achieved. The average life cycle of doing a thing in Call of Duty is very analogous to how people engage with short-form media. But from my perspective, this is not a good fit for Call of Duty, because instead of increasing player retention, it pushed away any players that aren't a fan of that style of game. So there are people that love that style of game, and if you love that, that's fine, that's great, that's good for you. I'm not going to give you a holier-than-thou lecture, but it's very unappealing to people that don't like that style, and it's a hard one to compromise on. I think Call of Duty works best with a slightly longer combat loop. At least I personally prefer it that way. And I want to be clear that I'm not advocating for a slow Tarkov-style game or some kind of really extreme change, but I do think Call of Duty is more fun when you can spawn in and be safe about 99% of the time. I know, very generous for this game. But that means that after your cycle resets, you have a few seconds to think about what's going on. You can look at the minimap, figure out what path you want to take, if you want to push A flag or B flag, or what weapons you want to run. You just have options for your new lease on life, your digital life, that is. And I feel that this increases player agency and gives them a small amount of time to decide what tactic best fits the situation that they're in. So for example, if I spawn, I'm safe, I can breathe, coming down from the dopamine, I see a couple of paths in front of me, I have my agency, I choose what gun I want, and I choose where I'm going to go, and I go and I either get a kill, that's great, that's dopamine, because I've done a good thing, or if I fail, it just resets again, and I get another moment to go, okay, I lost that gunfight, time to reevaluate. But what's currently happening in Call of Duty is that you spawn and have like a quarter of a second not to pick a path, not to pick a strategy, a tactic, or a gun, but just try to figure out where all of the bullets are coming from and how to dodge the grenades in your spawn. You just come back to life and you're instantly in some kind of survival horror game. right? Instead of spawning and being a tactical warrior with their MP5 and their military tactics, you spawn in and you're like, got seconds, gotta figure this, just gotta run, sprint, slide, double shoot, fight my way out of the spawn. It's total chaos all the time. I don't find this to be very fun. I find it unappealing, actually. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy fast games, quite the opposite. Bad hands and boo-boos and playing from the bed aside, I still love fast games. I'll compare to two that's popular now. The Finals, incredibly fast, but it has a combat cycle where you're almost never going to get killed off the spawn, unless it's a revive, but that's part of the combat itself. And it has times of slowdown that allow you to choose your strategy and approach before the next fight. Marvel Rivals is an extremely fast-paced game. That's a game where you really need a high frame rate monitor to be competitive. And you are doing things and interactive and shooting all the time, every second. Pop, pop, pop. Super. The pacing of that, honestly, is so, or the combat is so fast, it's one of the reasons I don't play it. But the main flow of the game is still strategical and tactical. You make your decisions about where to go, where to position, how to engage in a fight. You often don't die instantly because you have healers and stuff going on. So I really enjoyed the Finals. I really enjoy Marvel Rivals. And I just want to clarify that it's not the fact that the game is fast. It's more that these other fast games give me agency about what I'm doing. In the Finals and Marvel Rivals, I'm making my own decisions and winning or losing my own gunfights, just based on my skill and my decision making. In Call of Duty, I spawn and just try to survive for more than a few seconds. Just dodge the spawns, just grenades in the spawn and the helicopter and the bullets coming in from 4 directions. There's no time for thought at all. It's completely brainless, and that's okay if you want to play brainless, right? That's a choice that we're about to talk about here in a moment. But I do hope that Call of Duty can slow down the combat loop just a little bit. We need more breathing room. I get that the game is fast-paced, and I totally get that some people love playing small maps. I get that some people love this. This is a place it should exist. Even I enjoy playing Nuketown on occasion. It can be really fun sometimes. But playing Nuketown, sometimes, as a choice, is different than, well, every single map is actually a different flavor of Nuketown, so what you're really playing is Nuketown 24/7, but it's like the 8-chip pack. They're all chips, they're just slightly different flavors, you know. I don't want that. So for the next Call of Duty game, whatever it happens to be, whenever it comes out, I hope I get a little bit more breathing room in the combat loop. I actually genuinely hope they slow down the combat loop. You can keep the gameplay super fast. As a matter of fact, I would prefer whoever's working on it to keep the actual gameplay really snappy and fast, because I like that. But the spawn and into chaos, don't want that at all. And that's my TED Talk about how social media has influenced the pace of video games. There's a lot of analogies to be made there, because you've got these cycles of boom and bust, of hype, and what's the opposite of hype? Doldrums, disappointment. You win or lose your gunfight. It's up and down. It happens on a pattern. Your brain loves this. It's too tight right now. It's too tight in Call of Duty. It's too fast. I need more breathing room really bad, and I hope I get it in the next game. Guys, that's all for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.